You hear them, don't you? The wolves that aren't there. They call me mad. They call me broken. Of all the cruelties I have endured, watching you stay silent was the one that broke me. She is nothing but a voice hearer, a fraud. Tell me, brother, if I release her right now, would you step forward? Or would you let her drown again? I could not allow it. She had never shifted. Not once in 23 years. The prince abandoned her before the entire court. What no one expected was the Alpha King's wolf, the beast that answered to no one, stepping forward on its own and claiming her. His eyes turned gold, and a voice that was not his own spoke through clenched teeth. Mine. She belongs to me. The howling started before dawn, as it always did. Era pressed her fingertips to her temples, trying to quiet the chorus of voices that threaded through her skull like silver wire. They weren't words exactly, more like impressions, flashes of hunger, territory, warning, desire, the inner language of wolves speaking to each other across distances no human ear should reach. She had stopped telling people about it years ago. The first time she mentioned it as a child, her mother had wept. The second time, the village healer had prescribed herbs meant to calm the mad. By the third time, Era learned that silence was safer than truth. The courtyard of Ironvale Castle stretched before her in the gray morning light. Servants hurried past with baskets and buckets, guards changed their posts, and somewhere beyond the eastern wall, the kennels stirred with the restless energy of wolves preparing to hunt. Era felt them all. Every wolf in the keep, every beast in the surrounding forest, their voices layering over one another like waves against stone. You're early again. She turned to find Master Aldrich watching her from the doorway of the healing hall, his weathered face creased with something between concern and curiosity. I couldn't sleep, she said, which was true enough. The voices? Era stiffened. Aldrich was one of the few who knew, one of the fewer still who didn't think her mad for it. He had taken her in as his apprentice 7 years ago when she was just 16, teaching her the arts of herbs and remedies, giving her purpose when the rest of the world offered only scorn. They're louder lately, she admitted. Restless. Something stirring in the northern packs. Aldrich studied her for a long moment. You should tell someone. Who would believe me? The answer came not from Aldrich, but from behind her. A voice smooth as poisoned honey. Certainly not anyone with sense. Era didn't need to turn to know who had spoken. She recognized that tone, the way she recognized the ache in her own chest, a wound that never quite healed no matter how many years passed. Lady Corinne descended the courtyard steps with 3 companions trailing behind her like shadows. Daughter of the High Chancellor, blessed with a wolf that had manifested at the unheard-of age of 14, Corinne carried herself as if the world existed solely to admire her. Still playing healer, Era? Corinne stopped a few paces away, close enough for her perfume to clash with the earthy scent of the morning. How noble. The mad girl who hears voices, grinding herbs for people who actually matter. The companions giggled, a sound like breaking glass. The wolves speak to me, Era said quietly, refusing to look away. Whether you believe it changes nothing. The wolves speak to her. Corinne pressed a hand to her chest in mock amazement. Did you hear that? Perhaps we should bow. Perhaps she's secretly a goddess trapped in the body of a wolfless nobody. More laughter. Era felt heat climb her neck but kept her expression still. Reactions were trophies. Tears were surrender. She had learned these lessons long ago. I have work to do, Era said, turning toward the healing hall. Oh, I'm sure you do. Corinne's voice followed her like a blade between the shoulders. But work won't warm your bed, dear. And it certainly won't make Prince Ronan see you as anything more than a passing curiosity. The words hit their mark. Era's step faltered, just for a moment, before she forced herself forward. Pity, really, Corinne called after her. All those years of trailing after him like a lost pup, and you can't even shift. Some wolves are just born defective, I suppose. Era pushed through the door of the healing hall and let it close behind her, blocking out the laughter that followed. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the wooden work table, breathing slowly, counting heartbeats until the trembling stopped. Aldrich appeared beside her but said nothing. He simply placed a bundle of dried feverfew before her, a task, a distraction, a kindness wrapped in silence. Ira reached for the herbs and began to work. She did not see the figure standing at the highest window of the eastern tower, still as stone, watching the courtyard below. She did not feel the weight of storm-colored eyes tracking her every movement. But somewhere deep in her chest, in that place where the wolf voices gathered and swirled, she felt something else. A presence, vast and patient, turning its attention toward her like a storm deciding where to land. Era had been 11 years old the first time she saw Ronan. She remembered it with painful clarity. The summer festival, the square packed with people, the princes parading through on horses draped in silver and black. Ronan had been 15 then, sun-touched hair gleaming as he laughed and waved to the crowd as if every smile he gave was a gift. Era had been standing near the fountain, invisible among the commoners, when his horse stopped barely 10 feet from her. A flower girl had stumbled into the street, and Ronan dismounted without hesitation, helping the child to her feet with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone of his station. Their eyes met as he climbed back onto his horse. Just a moment, barely a breath, but Era felt the world tilt beneath her. "Pretty, isn't he?" her mother had said, squeezing her shoulder. "Don't stare too long, little one. Princes aren't for girls like us." But Ira had stared, and she had never stopped. The years that followed were a slow accumulation of moments she treasured like stolen coins. When she came to Ironvale Castle at 16 to apprentice under Aldrich, Ronan began appearing in unexpected places: the gardens when she gathered herbs, the corridors when she carried supplies, the training yards when she took shortcuts to the kitchens. He spoke to her. Not often, not with promises, but with an attention that felt deliberate. He asked her name. He asked about her work. He asked once why she always looked so sad. "I hear things others don't," she had told him, testing the waters. "Then perhaps you hear things others should," he replied with that easy smile. "The world needs more listeners." It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't a vow, but Era had gathered those words with both hands and held them close, convincing herself they meant more than perhaps they did. Ronan had other women. She knew this. The court whispered about his conquests, his dalliances, and his string of beauties who warmed his bed and vanished with the seasons. But he always returned to her, to quiet conversations in shadowed alcoves, to glances across crowded halls, to moments that felt private even when surrounded by hundreds. "You're different, Era," he said once, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You see me, not the crown." She believed him. How could she not? But believing was not the same as belonging, and Era knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had spent her life on the outside, that wanting something did not make it yours. Still, she hoped. And while she hoped, she never noticed the other eyes that followed her, slate and watchful, belonging to the king who never smiled, the elder brother who ruled Ironvale with an iron grip, and a wolf that legends claimed had never been tamed. King Thane watched from towers and doorways, from across training fields and through crowded halls, his gaze finding her with an accuracy that defied coincidence. Era never saw him looking, but her gift did. The wolves inside her sometimes caught whispers of something immense and ancient, something that prowled at the edges of her awareness with a patience that felt almost predatory. She told herself it was nothing. She was wrong. The announcement came on the night of the autumn moon feast. Ironvale's great hall blazed with firelight. Banners of black and silver hung from the rafters, and the scent of roasted meat and spiced wine filled the air. Nobles danced in swirls of silk and velvet, while servants wove between them carrying trays of delicacies. Ira stood near the back, half hidden behind a pillar, wearing the only decent dress she owned, a deep green gown Aldrich had gifted her last winter. She felt out of place among the glittering crowd, a sparrow among peacocks, but Ronan had asked her to come. "Stay where I can see you," he'd whispered that afternoon, his breath warm against her ear. "Tonight will change everything." She didn't know what that meant, but hope, that stubborn creature, had awakened in her chest and refused to quiet. The music faded as Prince Ronan stepped onto the raised platform at the hall's center. His wheat-colored hair caught the firelight, and his smile radiated the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Friends, nobles, honored guests," his voice carried across the sudden silence. "The bonding moon approaches. In 3 weeks' time, we gather for the sacred rite, where wolves claim their destined mates." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The bonding ceremony was ancient tradition, a night when wolves chose their partners through instinct and ritual. To be claimed was honor, to be passed over was disgrace. Ronan raised his hand, and the hall fell silent again. "I stand before you tonight to make my intention known." His eyes swept the crowd, and Ira's pulse quickened when they found her. "At the coming ceremony, I will claim Era of the Healing Hall as my mate." The silence shattered into chaos. Whispers exploded through the hall, shocked, scandalized, disbelieving. Ira felt the blood drain from her face as every eye turned toward her hiding place behind the pillar. The healer's apprentice? But she doesn't have a wolf. Has the prince gone mad? Era couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world had narrowed to Ronan's smile across the crowded hall, triumphant and certain, as if he had given her the greatest gift imaginable. And perhaps he had. After 12 years of hoping, of gathering crumbs and telling herself they might become something whole, he had finally chosen her, publicly, irrevocably. Tears burned behind her eyes, joy and terror braided together until she couldn't tell them apart. Then her gift stirred. Through the chaos of voices, through the roaring in her own ears, Era caught something else, a presence at the edge of the hall, vast and still, watching with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Her eyes found the throne on the elevated dais. King Thane sat motionless, his face an impenetrable mask, but his eyes, those iron-gray eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, were fixed directly on her. And in their depths, Era saw something that made her breath catch. Not anger, not surprise, concern. As if he knew something she didn't. As if he could see a storm gathering on the horizon that she was too blinded by hope to notice. The moment passed. Thane looked away, his expression settling back into its usual unreadable stillness. But Era could not shake the chill that ran down her spine, nor the whisper from deep within her gift. A wolf's voice, ancient and vast, murmuring a single word she didn't understand. Soon. Lady Lysandra Voss came to Ironvale 3 days after the feast. Era saw the procession from the healing hall window. 6 black carriages trimmed in gold, a retinue of servants in matching livery, and at the center of it all, a woman who stepped onto the cobblestones as if she were arriving to claim a throne already promised to her. Lysandra was the kind of beautiful that felt engineered. Raven hair cascaded over shoulders left bare by a crimson gown that clung to every curve. Her eyes, a pale amber that caught the light like a predator's, swept across the courtyard with cold efficiency. When those eyes found Era watching from the window, something in them sharpened. Recognition, assessment, dismissal, all in the span of a single breath. "Who is she?" Era asked, though part of her already knew the answer would bring nothing good. Aldrich appeared at her shoulder, his expression troubled. "Lady Lysandra Voss, daughter of the Western Province's High Lord. They say she came seeking the king's hand." He paused, something dark flickering in his eyes. "But I suspect her ambitions are more flexible than that." Ira watched as Lysandra was greeted by the castle steward, as servants rushed to unload trunk after trunk of belongings, as the woman glided toward the main entrance with the posture of someone who had already won a war no one else knew was being fought. That evening, Lysandra sat beside Ronan at dinner. Ira, relegated to a lower table by unspoken rules of rank she had never been allowed to forget, watched the scene unfold with growing unease. Lysandra laughed at Ronan's jokes, her hand finding his arm with practiced ease. She leaned close to whisper things that made the prince's smile widen in ways Ira recognized too well. "She works fast." The voice came from beside her, a servant girl with mousy brown hair and sharp, watchful eyes. Ira had seen her around the kitchens but never learned her name. "I'm Wren," the girl said, as if reading her thoughts. "And you're the healer's apprentice the prince announced for. The one everyone's talking about. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No." Wren's gaze remained fixed on the high table, where Lysandra now rested her fingers over Ronan's hand in a gesture of unmistakable intimacy. "That woman has toppled 3 betrothals in the Western Province. She collects powerful men like trophies, then discards them once someone shinier appears." Ira's stomach twisted. "Ronan isn't like that. He chose me publicly. He chose you with words." Wren finally looked at her, and there was something unsettlingly like pity in her expression. "Words are easy, my lady. Watch what he does." She slipped away before Ira could respond, disappearing among the other servants as if she had never been there at all. Ira looked back at the high table. Ronan was laughing again, his head tilted toward Lysandra, his attention wholly captured. And on the throne above them both, King Thane sat in shadow, his gaze fixed not on the flirtation below, but on Ira herself, watching, waiting, as if he could see exactly what was coming and was powerless to stop it. Or perhaps not powerless, perhaps simply choosing not to interfere. Yet, the wolves were screaming. Ira pressed her hands over her ears, but it made no difference. The voices came from inside, a cacophony of alarm and warning that had torn her from sleep and driven her into the castle garden seeking air, space, silence she knew she wouldn't find. Something was wrong. The northern packs were in chaos, their communications fractured and desperate. She caught fragments. Intruders, blood, fire, but couldn't piece them together into anything coherent. She stumbled along the moonlit paths, breathing hard, trying to quiet the storm in her skull. "You hear them tonight." The voice came from the shadows beneath an ancient oak. Ira spun, her chest tightening, and found King Thane standing motionless in the darkness. He wore no crown, no royal regalia, just simple black clothing that made him seem less like a king and more like something older, wilder, carved from the night itself. His storm-colored eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting it back with an intensity that made her want to step away. She held her ground. "Your Majesty." She managed a bow, hating how breathless she sounded. "I didn't know anyone else was here. I often walk at night." He stepped forward, and she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands remained clasped behind his back as if restraining something. "The wolves speak louder when the world is quiet. You know this." It wasn't a question. Ira stared at him. "You believe me? About hearing them?" "I have no reason to doubt it." Thane stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the sharp lines of his jaw, the faint scar that traced his temple. "My wolf has sensed your gift since you first entered this castle. He finds it intriguing." Something in the way he said that last word made Ira's blood rush faster. "The northern packs," she said, grasping for safer ground. "Something's happening to them. I can feel their fear, but I can't understand why. Rogue attacks. We received word this evening." Thane's expression darkened. "My commanders are assessing the situation as we speak." "Is it serious?" "Serious enough to warrant attention, but not tonight's concern." His gaze returned to her, weighted with meaning she couldn't decipher. Silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. Ira became acutely aware of the warmth radiating from him despite the cool night air, the way her gift had gone strangely quiet in his presence, as if even the wolf voices recognized something that demanded respect. "You should be careful," Thane said finally, his voice dropping lower. "With my brother." The words hit her like cold water. "What do you mean?" "Ronan makes promises easily. He believes them when he speaks them." Thane's jaw tightened. But believing is not the same as keeping. He is drawn to novelty, to excitement. When those fade, so does his attention. Era felt anger flare in her chest. "You don't know what's between us." "I know my brother." His eyes met hers, and she saw something there she struggled to interpret. Frustration, perhaps, or a sadness too old to have simple origins. "I have watched him cycle through infatuations my entire life. I do not wish to see you become another name he barely remembers." "That's not your decision to make." "No." Thane stepped back, the distance between them suddenly feeling vast. "It isn't. But you deserve someone certain, Era. Someone who does not need an audience to find his courage." He turned and walked away before she could respond, his dark form dissolving into the shadows as if he had never been there at all. Era stood alone in the moonlit garden, her pulse racing for reasons she refused to examine. "You deserve someone certain." She pushed the words away. Ronan had chosen her. That was enough. It had to be. The days that followed were an exercise in slow suffocation. Ronan stopped seeking her out. The quiet conversations in shadowed corners, the glances across crowded rooms, the moments that had sustained her hope for years, all of it vanished as if it had never existed. He was always with Lysandra now, walking the gardens, dining at her side, disappearing into private chambers for hours at a time. The court whispered, and Ira pretended not to hear, but each rumor carved another piece from her chest. "He's just being polite," she told herself. "She's a visiting noble. He has duties." But the lies tasted bitter, and they grew harder to swallow with each passing day. On the eve of the bonding ceremony, Era found him alone in the stables. Ronan looked up as she entered, and for a moment, just a moment, something like guilt flickered across his handsome face before his usual easy smile slid back into place. "Era?" He set down the brush he'd been using on his horse. "I was hoping to see you." "Were you?" She stopped a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself. "You've been difficult to find lately." "Things have been complicated." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she once found charming but now recognized as deflection. "Lysandra's visit has required more attention than I expected. Politics, alliances, you understand." "Do I?" Ronan's smile faltered. "Era. Tomorrow is the ceremony." She forced the words out past the tightness in her throat. "Are you still going to claim me?" The silence lasted a heartbeat too long. "Of course." Ronan stepped toward her, taking her hands in his. His grip was warm, familiar, and somehow entirely unconvincing. "I gave you my word, didn't I? In front of everyone." "Words are easy," Era whispered, echoing Ren without meaning to. "Trust me." He squeezed her hands, his blue eyes earnest. "Everything will be fine. I just need you to be patient a little longer." She wanted to believe him. She had spent 12 years believing him. But as Era walked back to her quarters that night, the wolf voices stirring restlessly in her mind, she could not shake the feeling that patience was simply another word for waiting to be destroyed. The bonding ceremony began at moonrise. Ironvale's great hall had been transformed. The sacred circle dominated the center of the marble floor, ancient runes carved into stone that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting long shadows across the assembled crowd. Nobles, elders, warriors, all gathered to witness wolves claim their mates. Era stood near the edge of the circle, her white ceremonial gown feeling like a shroud. Her hands trembled beneath the flowing sleeves, and no amount of deep breathing could calm the thunder of her heart. The wolf voices were deafening tonight. Every shifted wolf in the hall added to the chorus in her mind: excitement, anticipation, hunger, until she could barely hear her own thoughts. One by one, wolves stepped forward to make their claims. Couples formed, hands clasped, declarations made. The crowd applauded politely, whispered assessments of political advantage, and calculated the worth of each union. Then Ronan's name was called. The prince walked to the center of the circle, his hair gleaming in the torchlight. He looked every inch the royal heir, confident, beautiful, and destined for greatness. Era stepped forward. It was expected. It was what everyone expected. She felt the eyes turn toward her, some curious, some hostile, some gleaming with barely concealed mockery. The whispers began before she even reached the circle's edge. The voice hearer thinks she'll be claimed, but she can't even shift. The prince must be under some enchantment. Era kept walking. 12 years of hope carried her forward when her legs wanted to flee. Ronan saw her approaching. His expression flickered. Loss? Shame? Regret? Before settling into something carefully neutral. The elder presiding over the ceremony raised his staff. Prince Ronan, second son of the Iron Throne, have you come to make your claim? The silence that followed was absolute. Ronan opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes found Era's across the circle, and she saw the answer in them before he spoke. This cycle, his voice came out thin, barely audible. I claim no one. The world ended. Not with fire or fury, but with silence. A silence that lasted one eternal heartbeat before shattering into whispers that spread through the hall like wildfire. He abandoned her? The mad girl actually believed? How humiliating. Era couldn't move. Her feet had rooted to the stone floor. Her lungs had forgotten how to breathe. She stood exposed at the edge of the sacred circle, every nightmare she had ever had about this moment manifesting in excruciating detail. Laughter rippled from somewhere behind her. Corinne's voice, unmistakable in its cruelty. Perhaps her imaginary wolves can comfort her tonight. More laughter, more whispers, more eyes drinking in her devastation like wine. Era wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted the earth to open and swallow her whole, but her body refused to obey. She simply stood there, frozen, while the world collapsed around her. And then something changed. Era felt it before she saw it. A shift in the wolf voices, a sudden hush that rippled through her gift like a stone dropped into still water. Every wolf in the hall fell silent at once, their attention snapping towards something behind her with an intensity that bordered on fear. She turned. King Thane had risen from his throne. He descended the dais steps slowly, deliberately, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. His face was unreadable, utterly controlled, but his eyes were changing. The gray she had grown accustomed to was bleeding away, replaced by something molten and golden, something that did not belong to a man. His movements grew more fluid, more predatory, as if something else was rising to the surface, taking control of limbs that had always belonged to it. The crowd parted before him like waves before a ship's prow. Nobles stumbled backward. Elders gripped their staffs with white-knuckled hands. Even Ronan retreated, his face draining of color as his brother passed him without a glance. Thane stopped at the edge of the sacred circle directly in front of Era. She could feel it now. The presence she had sensed at the edges of her gift for years, vast and ancient and utterly untamed. It wasn't Thane looking at her through those golden eyes. It was his wolf. The beast that legends claimed had never submitted to anyone, not even its own human half. When he spoke, the voice was Thane's, but also not. Deeper, rougher, layered with something that made every wolf in the hall lower their heads in instinctive submission. Mine. The word resonated through the chamber like a thunderclap. She belongs to me. Chaos erupted. Elders shouted. Nobles gasped. Somewhere, a woman screamed. But the wolf paid no attention to any of it. Those golden eyes remained fixed on Era with an intensity that should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something stir in her chest, something that had been sleeping for 23 years, waiting for exactly this moment. The wolf extended Thane's hand toward her, palm up, fingers open, an offering, not a command. "Choose," the beast said, and beneath the otherworldly resonance, Era heard something almost vulnerable. "Choose me." She looked at that hand, looked at the golden eyes that held no deception, no hesitation, and no possibility of retreat. Looked at the hall full of people who had spent her entire life telling her she was broken, worthless, mad. And she made her choice. Her hand found his. The moment their skin touched, lightning shot through her veins. She gasped, her knees buckling, as something deep inside her, something ancient and powerful and entirely her own, cracked open like an egg and began to unfold. The golden eyes softened. The wolf rumbled something that sounded almost like satisfaction. Then the gold receded, gray flooding back, and it was Thane who stood before her, shaken, breathing hard, but holding her hand as if he would never let go. "What just happened?" Era whispered. "My wolf chose you," Thane replied, his voice rough, before I could even understand why. Behind them, the hall remained frozen in shock. The mad girl who heard wolves had just been claimed by the Alpha King's beast itself. Nothing would ever be the same. The council assembled before dawn. Era sat in chambers she didn't recognize, wrapped in a robe she didn't own, trying to process a night that refused to make sense. The rooms were vast, sitting areas with velvet furniture, shelves lined with ancient books, windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. "The king's mate's quarters," a servant had whispered while guiding her here. "Reserved for centuries, now occupied by her." A knock at the door made her flinch. Marta, the round-faced maid who had been assigned to attend her, poked her head inside. "The king requests your presence at the council session, my lady." She hesitated. "He said to warn you. They're not happy." Era almost laughed. Not happy seemed a spectacular understatement. The council chamber was a storm of raised voices when she entered. Elders stood red-faced around the long table. Nobles argued in clusters. And at the head of it all, Thane sat motionless, letting the chaos wash over him like waves against a cliff. His eyes found hers the moment she crossed the threshold. Something in them steadied her, not warmth exactly, but certainty. An anchor in the tempest. "Ah, the voice hearer arrives." Chancellor Dravos spat the words like poison. "Perhaps she can explain how she bewitched the king's wolf into this mockery of tradition." "I bewitched nothing." Era forced her voice to remain steady. "I don't even understand what happened." "A likely story." "Enough." Thane's voice cut through the chamber, and silence fell instantly. "Era is here as my guest, not as a defendant. Anyone who treats her otherwise insults me directly." Dravos paled but didn't back down. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, the woman cannot shift. She has no wolf. The sacred laws state that a claim made within the ceremonial circle is irrevocable." Thane's iron gaze was cold. "My wolf made his claim. The runes accepted it. Or does the council presume to overrule powers far older than any of us?" Uncomfortable silence. "Furthermore," Thane continued, "Era possesses a gift this kingdom has not seen in generations. She hears the wolf voices, all of them. The northern pack attacks we received word of last week? She sensed them before any messenger arrived." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Era saw expressions shifting from hostility to uncertainty to reluctant interest. "The voice-hearer gift is myth," Elder Corwin protested weakly. "Then perhaps it's time to update your understanding of myth." Thane rose from his seat, and his presence seemed to fill the entire room. "Era is under my protection. She will receive every privilege her position demands. Anyone who questions this questions my authority as king." One by one, the council members lowered their eyes, but not everyone accepted defeat gracefully. How touching. Lysandra's voice sliced through the tension like a blade. She stood near the chamber's entrance, crimson gown pristine, amber eyes glittering with barely contained fury. The king defends his broken little prize. Tell me, your majesty, does she warm your bed as well as she hears imaginary voices? The temperature in the room plummeted. Thane turned toward Lysandra with the slow, deliberate movement of a predator selecting its next meal. When he spoke, his voice was soft and infinitely more terrifying for it. Lady Lysandra, you came to this castle as a guest. Guests observe certain courtesies. He took a step toward her, and she actually flinched. Any disrespect toward my chosen mate is a direct challenge to the throne. Is that a challenge you wish to make? Lysandra's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the chamber, finding no allies, no support. You may leave Ironvale by midday. Your belongings will be sent after you. The dismissal was absolute. Lysandra opened her mouth, closed it, and fled the chamber without another word. Ira barely had time to process this victory before the doors burst open again. Ronan stood in the entrance, his handsome face ravaged by sleeplessness, his eyes wild with something that looked like desperation. Brother, his voice cracked. We need to talk. Alone. Thane studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to Era, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. Wait for me in the gardens. This won't take long. The brothers walked in silence until they reached the Queen's private rose garden, a walled sanctuary their mother had planted decades ago, now overgrown and wild, forgotten by everyone except those who remembered her. Ronan spun to face Thane the moment they were alone. You had no right. I had every right. Thane's voice remained calm. My wolf recognized her. I could no more stop him than I could stop my own heartbeat. She was mine. Ronan's hands clenched into fists. I announced her before the entire court. And then you abandoned her before the entire court. Thane stepped closer, and Ronan instinctively retreated. You left her standing there, exposed, humiliated, while you lacked the courage to either claim her or release her honestly. I needed more time. For what? To decide whether Lysandra's political connections outweighed years of Era's devotion? Thane shook his head, something old and tired flickering in his eyes. You never wanted Era, Ronan. You wanted the way she looked at you. There's a difference. Ronan's face contorted. Before Thane could react, his brother lunged at him, fist swinging toward his jaw. Thane caught the blow effortlessly. He twisted, pinning Ronan's arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees among the wild roses. Let go. Not until you hear me. Thane's voice was iron. Tell me, brother, if I withdrew the claim right now, would you step forward and take her? Ronan struggled against the hold. Would you claim her? Thane pressed harder. Or is your pride simply wounded because someone else recognized what you were too blind to see? The silence that followed was answer enough. Thane released him. Ronan collapsed forward, breathing hard, not meeting his brother's eyes. That's what I thought. Thane turned and walked away. Stay away from her, Ronan. My wolf will not be as gentle if there's a next time. Night had fallen by the time Thane came to her chambers. Era had spent the hours pacing, sitting, and pacing again, her mind a tempest of questions without answers. When the knock came, her blood rushed to her cheeks before she could control it. He entered without ceremony, still wearing the same clothes from the council session, exhaustion carved into the lines of his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. How did it go? Era finally asked. With Ronan? Something flickered in Thane's expression, there and gone before she could name it. It went as it needed to. Is he all right? The question hung between them. Thane walked to the window, bracing his hands against the frame, his back to her. You're worried about him. It wasn't a question. His voice carried a weight she didn't understand. He's your brother. I don't want to be the cause of... You're not the cause of anything. Thane turned, and she saw something raw in his eyes. something he usually kept buried beneath layers of royal composure. Ronan made his choices. Whatever stands between us now was built by his own hands. But, Era. Her name on his lips stopped her cold. I need to know something. And I need you to answer honestly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Do you still love him? The question struck like a physical blow. Era opened her mouth to respond, to deny, to deflect, to say whatever would smooth the tension in the room. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was complicated. She had loved Ronan for 12 years. That love had shaped her, driven her, and defined her in ways she was only beginning to understand. It couldn't simply vanish overnight, no matter how badly he had hurt her. But when she searched her heart now, reaching for the feelings she had carried for so long, she found something unexpected. Emptiness. Not the aching void of loss, but the quiet stillness of something that had already died and been mourned without her noticing. I thought I did, she said slowly. For years I was certain of it. But now, she looked at Thane, really looked at him. The sharp lines of his jaw, the slate eyes that saw too much, the careful control that hid depths she was only beginning to glimpse. Now I think I loved the idea of him, she continued. The hope that someone like him could choose someone like me. But that's not love. That's desperation dressed up in prettier clothes. Thane was very still. And you? Era stepped closer, driven by something she couldn't explain. Your wolf chose me, but what about you? Am I just an obligation? A promise you inherited? No. The word came out rough, almost broken. Then what am I? Thane closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the careful control had cracked, revealing something vast and aching beneath. I have watched you for years, he said quietly. At first, yes, because I felt responsible. Your parents served my family. Their sacrifice earned you protection I was honor-bound to provide. He took a shuddering breath. But somewhere along the way, responsibility became something else. I started looking for you in crowds, listening for your voice in corridors, finding reasons to walk paths I knew you traveled. Era's chest tightened until breathing hurt. My wolf knew before I did. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He tried to tell me. I refused to listen. You were Ronan's, or so I believed. And I would never take what belonged to my brother. I was never his. I know that now. Thane's gaze held hers, burning with an intensity that made her blood sing. But knowing doesn't erase years of denial. I trained myself not to want you, Era. And then I watched you walk toward that circle, watched Ronan prepare to destroy you. And every chain I had wrapped around my wolf's heart shattered at once. The distance between them had shrunk to inches. Era could feel the heat radiating from him, smell pine and iron and something wilder underneath. He would have let you fall, Thane whispered. I couldn't. I would have burned the entire kingdom before I let that happen. Era made her choice. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he didn't respond. Frozen, perhaps uncertain this was real. Then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him with a fierceness that stole her breath. He kissed her back like a man drowning, like she was air and salvation, and everything he had denied himself for far too long. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Era felt tears on her cheeks without knowing when they had fallen. I don't know what this is, she confessed. Everything is happening so fast. Then we go slow. Thane pressed his forehead to hers, his breathing ragged. Whatever this becomes, it will be your choice. Not duty, not tradition, not my wolf's instincts. His hands cradled her face with impossible gentleness. Just you and me, choosing each other. Every day. For as long as you'll have me. Era smiled through her tears. That sounds like a good place to start. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Era had ever known. She moved through her new life like a dreamer afraid of waking. The luxurious chambers, the servants who bowed when she passed, the seat at Thane's side during every meal and council session, none of it felt real. But Thane felt real. He courted her with a patience that undid her defenses one by one. Small gifts appeared in her chambers, rare herbs for her healing work, books on wolf history she had mentioned wanting to read, a cloak lined with fur so soft it felt like clouds against her skin. He walked with her through the gardens, listening as she described the wolf voices she heard, asking questions that proved he genuinely wanted to understand. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. The first time he kissed her goodnight and walked away without asking for more, Era cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had never known what it felt like to be cherished. Ronan kept his distance. She saw him sometimes across crowded halls, his eyes finding hers with something that might have been regret. But he never approached, and she never sought him out. That chapter of her life had closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. But something else was changing, something she couldn't ignore. Her gift was growing stronger. The wolf voices that had been a constant background hum now came through with crystalline clarity. She could distinguish individual wolves across vast distances. She could feel their emotions, their needs, their warnings. And sometimes, late at night, she sensed something else stirring at the edges of her awareness. Something that felt like it was waking up. It happened 3 weeks after the ceremony. Era woke in the darkest hour of the night, her body burning with a heat that seemed to rise from her very bones. She threw off the blankets, gasping, as something inside her twisted and stretched and demanded release. The wolf voices had gone silent. For the first time in her life, her mind was completely, terrifyingly quiet. No, not quiet. Waiting. The door burst open. Thane stood in the entrance, barefoot, his shirt hastily thrown on, his storm-gray eyes wild with something between fear and wonder. "You feel it," Era gasped. "How?" "My wolf." Thane crossed to her in 3 strides. "He's been restless for days. Tonight he woke me from sleep, howling inside my skull." His hands found her shoulders, steadying her as another wave of heat crashed through her body. "Era, I think your wolf is waking." "I don't have a wolf." The words came out as a sob. "Everyone said, 23 years, it's impossible. Nothing about you has ever been impossible." Thane's voice was fierce. "Your gift, your strength, the way my wolf recognized you before either of us understood, you were never broken, Era. You were waiting." Another wave hit, stronger than before. Era cried out, her knees buckling, and Thane caught her, lowering them both to the floor. "It hurts." I know. He held her against his chest, one hand stroking her hair, the other pressed flat against her spine. "Don't fight it. Let her come." "Her? Your wolf. She's been sleeping inside you all this time, waiting for the right moment." His lips brushed her temple. "Waiting for you to be ready." The pain crescendoed, and Era screamed as her bones began to shift. She had heard wolves describe their first transformation, the agony of reshaping, the terror of losing human form. But nothing had prepared her for this. It felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously, every cell in her body rewriting itself into something new. Through the haze of transformation, she heard Thane's voice, unwavering and calm, anchoring her to reality. "You're doing so well. So well. She's beautiful, Era. Gods, she's beautiful." And then, suddenly the pain stopped. Era opened her eyes and found the world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents layered with information she had never known existed. She looked down and saw paws where hands should be. Silver fur, pure as moonlight, claws that gleamed like polished steel. She had shifted. After 23 years of being called broken, worthless, defective, she had a wolf. A sob worked its way up her throat. emerging as a high, keening howl that echoed through the chamber. And from deep inside her mind, a voice answered. Not the distant wolves she had heard all her life, but something closer, warmer, utterly her own. Finally, her wolf whispered, I have waited so long to meet you. Thane knelt before her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and rested his hand against her silver cheek. I knew it, he breathed. From the moment my wolf first sensed you, I knew there was something extraordinary sleeping inside. Era pressed her muzzle into his palm, overcome with emotions too vast for words. And then, she caught his scent. Really caught it, with a wolf's senses instead of a human's, and the world stopped. Pine, iron, stone. And beneath it all, something that resonated through every fiber of her being like a bell being struck. Mate. The word exploded through her consciousness. Her wolf surged forward with recognition, with certainty, with a joy that brought fresh tears to Era's newly golden eyes. Thane felt it too. She could see it in the way his breath caught, the way his eyes widened, the way his hand trembled against her fur. You feel it, he whispered. The bond. She shifted back without meaning to, the transformation smoother this time, and found herself human again, naked and shaking and crying in his arms. We're mates, she gasped. Real mates. That's why your wolf chose me. He knew. Thane kissed her before she could finish, pouring years of longing into the contact. And when they came together that night, truly together for the first time, Era felt the bond complete itself. A golden thread connecting her soul to his. Unbreakable, eternal, exactly as it was always meant to be. Morning came wrapped in tangled sheets and whispered confessions. Era lay in Thane's arms, tracing the scars on his chest while he told her stories of battles fought and prices paid. Outside the window, the sun climbed higher, and with it came the weight of reality. The council will demand an explanation, Thane murmured against her hair. A public one. Then we give them one. Era lifted her head, meeting his eyes. I'm done hiding. I'm done being ashamed of what I am. His smile made her heart ache. That's my queen. The great hall was packed by midday. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire. The voice hearer had shifted. The mad girl had a wolf. The impossible had happened. Ira walked through the crowd with Thane at her side, her chin held high, wearing a gown of silver and black that proclaimed her allegiance for all to see. She felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers that followed in her wake. But she also felt her wolf, awake and alert, lending her courage she had never possessed alone. The throne dais had been arranged for a formal presentation. The council sat in attendance, their expressions ranging from skeptical to grudgingly curious. And in the front row, Elder Seraphina, the oldest wolf in the kingdom, keeper of histories and prophecies, watched with eyes that seemed to see straight through to Era's soul. The council has demanded proof, Chancellor Dravos announced, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. Proof that the king's claimed mate possesses a true wolf and is not merely... Merely what? Thane's voice cut like a blade. Choose your next words carefully, Chancellor. Dravos swallowed whatever insult he had been preparing. Merely mistaken about her nature. Then she will provide your proof. Thane turned to Era, and his expression softened. Whenever you're ready. Era stepped forward into the open space before the thrones. She could feel hundreds of eyes boring into her, could hear the rapid heartbeats of wolves who still doubted, still judged, and still waited for her to fail. She closed her eyes and called her wolf. The transformation flowed through her like water, no pain this time, only the joy of becoming whole. She heard gasps from the crowd, felt the shift in energy as her human form gave way to silver fur and golden eyes. When she opened those eyes, the hall had gone absolutely silent. She was larger than she had realized, nearly as big as Thane's legendary black wolf, which should have been impossible for a newly awakened female. Her fur shimmered like moonlight given form, and when she lifted her head and howled, the sound carried harmonics that made every wolf in the hall instinctively bow their heads. Ancient blood. Elder Seraphina's voice trembled as she rose from her seat. By the old gods and the new, she carries the blood of the first pack. The murmurs that followed were not hostile. They were awed. The first pack? Dravos sputtered. That's myth. Legend. Look at her. Seraphina gestured toward Era's wolf form with a shaking hand. The silver coat, the harmonic howl, the gift of hearing all wolves. These are the marks of the Voice Walkers, the ancient line that could speak to any wolf across any distance. They were said to have died out centuries ago. Apparently, Thane said, and Era could hear the pride in his voice. They were simply sleeping. Era shifted back, and this time Thane was ready with a cloak to wrap around her shoulders. She faced the council, the nobles, and the crowds who had mocked her for 23 years. I am not mad, she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. I was never mad. I heard the wolves because that is my gift. A gift passed down from bloodlines this kingdom had forgotten. You called me broken because you did not understand. You laughed because it was easier than admitting you were wrong. She let her gaze sweep the crowd, finding faces she recognized. Corinne, pale and shrinking. Dravos, unable to meet her eyes. And in the back of the hall, half hidden behind a pillar, Ronan, watching with an expression of such profound loss that she almost felt sorry for him. Almost? I am Era of the Voice Walkers, she continued, mate to King Thane of Iron Vale, and I am done apologizing for existing. One by one, wolves throughout the hall lowered themselves to their knees. Nobles followed. Even the council members bent their heads, whether from genuine respect or simple self-preservation. Thane's hand found hers, solid and sure. My queen, he murmured, for her ears alone. Era smiled. A real smile, the first one she could remember giving without fear or reservation. In the back of the hall, Ronan turned and walked away. She watched him go, feeling nothing but the quiet closure of a door that should have been shut long ago. Later, in the privacy of their chambers, Thane held her close and asked the question she had been waiting for. Are you happy? Era considered the question carefully. Happiness had always seemed like something meant for other people. Brighter people. Luckier people. People who hadn't spent their lives being called mad and broken and worthless. But here, now, wrapped in the arms of her mate, her wolf content and settled in the back of her mind, her enemies silenced and her truth finally spoken. Yes, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. For the first time in my entire life, I truly am.